She paid full price for 2 first-class seats. She boarded quietly with her 9-year-old son. But 10 minutes into the flight, he was slapped across the face by a flight attendant. Why? Because he asked for orange juice twice. This isn't just a story about a mother defending her child. This is the story of a powerful but quiet woman, who the crew never realized was the billionaire founder of one of the most influential human rights tech firms in the country. Her name is Naomi Ellison, and what she did next didn't just shake one airline, it rewrote the rules of dignity in the sky. How far would you go to protect your child's innocence? What happens when justice boards the plane wearing a calm face and holding her son's hand? This story will break your heart, make you furious. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you believe every voice deserves to be heard, and that no child should ever be punished for simply existing in the wrong seat. Now, let's begin. Naomi Ellison hadn't flown commercial in nearly 6 years. Not because she thought herself above it, but because she no longer had the patience for the games people played at 30,000 feet. But today was different. She sat quietly in the back of a black town car just outside SeaTac International Airport, watching her 9-year-old son, Jaden, trace his finger along the condensation on the window. He wrote the word sky backward, then erased it with the edge of his sleeve. "Are you nervous?" she asked softly. Jaden shrugged. "A little. It's our first flight together. Right?" She nodded, brushing his curls from his forehead. "It is. But it won't be our last. The last time she was on a plane was the night they flew her husband's body home." Daniel had been a pilot. Calm, methodical, warm-hearted. He died mid-flight, heart attack, 20 minutes before landing. The passengers never knew, only she did, and she'd carried that secret ever since. The town car rolled toward Terminal C. Naomi adjusted the sleeve of her sand-colored blazer and reached for her phone. Raylan's text flashed on the screen. "Boarding now. Elevar Flight 609 confirmed. Crew manifest reviewed. CEO flag not visible in system. Proceeding anonymously. Good. That's what she wanted. No VIP greeter, no gate announcement, no bells and whistles. She wanted to walk through that gate like any mother, any woman, any black woman, quietly doing her best. She wanted to know if no one knew her name. How would they treat her son inside the terminal? The tension began almost imperceptibly. His tone was clipped, like he'd made a decision about her before she spoke. Jaden's travel bag was pulled for inspection, despite being well within guidelines. A white family next to them breezed through without so much as a glance. Still, Naomi said nothing. Her calm was her armor. They reached Gate C-12 just as the announcement rang out, final call for Elevar Flight 609 to Boston. First-class passengers may board now. The gate agent's eyes flicked over their boarding passes. Her smile was tight, performative. First class is for premium-level ticket holders only. "Ma'am." Naomi said nothing. She simply held out the pass again, her fingers steady. The agent scanned it, frowned briefly, then covered it with a smile. "Ah, I see. Enjoy your flight." They walked down the jet bridge in silence. Naomi caught her son looking up at her. Was she being mean? "No," Naomi said quietly, "just unsure." Inside the aircraft. The cabin was cool and Naomi stepped into first class and immediately felt the shift. That subtle, palpable pause when strangers ask themselves, "Do you belong here?" A man in a navy sport coat glanced at her. then at Jaden. His eyes flickered with disapproval. A woman wearing diamonds far too large for a 9 a.m. flight tilted her head and pursed her lips, as if calculating Naomi's net worth by the texture of her handbag. The flight attendant at the front, a pale woman with an immaculately tight bun, greeted a white couple ahead of them with a warm, "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Benton." But when Naomi stepped forward, her smile vanished. "Can I help you?" Naomi offered the boarding passes, seats 2A and 2B. The woman glanced at them, then back at Naomi's face. A pause, slight, but it landed. "This way," she said without warmth. Naomi helped Jaden into the window seat. The boy looked around. "First time in first class? Huh. You've done this before?" he asked. She hesitated. "Yes, but it feels different today." The flight attendant passed by again, this time to offer drinks to the couple in 1A and 1B. She didn't look at Naomi, didn't offer water, didn't ask for their preferences. Naomi watched the behavior with the same calm she used in boardrooms when junior executives tried to cut her off mid-sentence. She opened her tablet, tapped out a message to Raylan. "Manifest notes correct. Crew behavior under review. Minimal courtesy observed. Proceeding quietly." The seatbelt sign pinged. Engines hummed to life. Jaden pulled out his sketchbook and began drawing airplanes. Naomi reached for his hand beneath the tray table and squeezed gently. This wasn't just a flight. This was, could a black woman in silence still command truth? Could her son, innocent and wide-eyed, be allowed to exist in luxury without apology? As the plane lifted off the runway, Naomi closed her eyes for a long moment. She didn't know that, in 3 hours, the world would know her name again, but not because of what she built, not because of her brilliance or legacy. They would know her because someone touched her child, and because Naomi Ellison never lets harm go unanswered, even at 38,000 feet. The plane had leveled off somewhere over Montana, outside the oval window. Clouds spread like cotton across the horizon, soft and deceivingly peaceful. But inside the cabin of Elevar Flight 609, a quieter storm had already begun. Jaden leaned into the window, pressing his nose gently to the glass. "Do you think we're higher than birds fly?" he asked, still whispering like the cabin had rules he hadn't been taught. "Birds don't come up here. Just us and the sky." He nodded and leaned back, comforted by the idea. Naomi glanced around the cabin again, observing with the subtle, trained eye of someone who had once spent years decoding policy briefings and civil rights depositions. The cues were all there. Too many sideways glances, too many shallow smiles that dropped the moment she turned away. Conversations behind her quieted when she adjusted in her seat. It wasn't new, but it still pierced something quiet inside her. The flight attendant, Whitney Sloan, according to the platinum name tag pinned too perfectly to her pressed blouse, made her way down the aisle. She paused at seats 1A and 1B, where an elderly couple exchanged whispers and laughter. "Can I get you anything ginger ale champagne?" She leaned in, laughing along with them like they were old friends. When she turned to approach Naomi and Jaden, her expression reset to something cold. She stopped beside them, tablet in hand. "Would you like something to drink?" Her tone was sterile, her eyes not quite meeting Naomi's. Naomi lifted her gaze slowly. "What are you serving?" Whitney clicked the tablet screen without answering directly. "Orange juice, cranberry, water, soda." Jaden raised his hand halfway, then hesitated. Can I have a ginger ale?" Whitney looked at him for the first time. Her eyes flicked from his small fingers to his sneakers and back to his face. Then she blinked. "We're not doing ginger ale this morning," she said flatly. "You can have orange juice or water." "Oh," he said, shrinking a little in his seat. "Okay, water then, please." Naomi's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Instead, she leaned back and watched Whitney take 2 more steps before her warmth returned instantly at row 3. "Mr. Voss, always a pleasure flying with us again," a deep male voice answered with friendly politeness. Behind her, a passenger shifted and whispered, not so quietly, "Entitlement looks different nowadays, doesn't it?" Another replied under breath, First class used to mean something." Naomi said nothing. Her silence was learned, earned, weighted with years of experience. She reached down to her briefcase and pulled out a book, dog-eared and underlined, Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. It wasn't for show. She reread it often, not for its legal insights, but for its quiet insistence that dignity doesn't depend on permission. Beside her, Jaden took a sip of water and wrinkled his nose. "It's warm," he whispered. Naomi sighed inwardly. She flagged Whitney gently. "Yes," Whitney said, returning like she'd been summoned reluctantly. "His water is room temperature. Do you have any that's chilled?" Whitney offered the kind of smile that didn't touch her eyes. "We serve all beverages at standard temperature, ma'am. No apology, no effort." Naomi met her. Whitney turned sharply and walked away. A moment later, the man in row 3 leaned forward, tapping lightly on the armrest between them. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Are you all right?" Naomi glanced sideways. He had kind eyes, soft creases at the corners, mixed race, maybe, early 50s, a charcoal sport coat and book on international law in the seat pocket. "We're fine, thank you," she replied, her voice even. He nodded, but didn't pull away just yet. "I saw that," he added. "Just so you know, you're not imagining it." Naomi gave a faint nod. "Noted." He sat back quietly, understanding the boundary. Some allies didn't need to announce themselves. They simply stayed aware. As the meal service began, Whitney returned again, now more composed. She asked what they'd like for breakfast, oatmeal or a mushroom frittata. Jaden chose oatmeal. Naomi declared, "There's no fruit like the others have," he said softly, glancing at the tray across the aisle. Naomi looked, and sure enough, the same oatmeal tray over there had a small bowl of berries. Jaden's didn't. Naomi exhaled, calmly, measured. She pressed the call button. Whitney appeared after 2 minutes, her lips tight. "Yes," Naomi pointed gently. "The tray here is missing the fruit portion that's been served with other meals." Whitney stared for a moment, then replied, "We may have had limited quantities. We prioritize our frequent flyers." "I see," Naomi said, "and this is your official policy." Whitney blinked, thrown slightly by the tone. It's common courtesy. The gentleman over there is platinum tier." Naomi didn't break eye contact. "My son is not a tier. He's a child, and children deserve kindness." Whitney opened her mouth, then closed it. "Forget it," Naomi said finally. "It's not worth it." As Whitney walked away again, Naomi turned to him and gently touched his hand. "Yes, I do, but not for me. For you." Outside, the sky shifted to a pale blue. Sunlight flooded the cabin, but inside, Naomi felt the familiar weight of composure pressing on her lungs, the sense that if she made too much noise, too much eye contact, or too sharp a correction, she would become the problem. Her thoughts wandered. She remembered standing in a courtroom years ago, watching a teenage boy be sentenced as an adult. Remembered the judge's voice, flat and indifferent. Remembered swearing to herself that no one would ever silence her like that again. And now, here she was, in a plush leather seat, still fighting for basic decency. She looked down at her son, who had gone quiet, doodling the wing of the airplane on a napkin. He had no idea that she'd turned down the private jet for this. Naomi picked up her phone, typed a message to Raylan, minor pattern confirmed. Crew courtesy inconsistent. Will continue observation, hold in action. The phone buzzed seconds later. Raylan's reply was short. Understood, logged, call if needed. Naomi set the phone down and folded her hands. The seatbelt sign blinked overhead. Jaden leaned into her arm. Are we almost there? Naomi kissed the top of his head. We're just getting started. The cabin had gone quiet except for the distant hum of engines and the occasional click of cutlery against china. Somewhere in the middle rows, someone sneezed. A few pages of a business magazine flipped in unison, and beside Naomi, her son still clutched the half-empty cup of warm water like it was all he was allowed. Naomi shifted slightly in her seat. Her body was still, but her mind had begun cataloging. She wasn't recording video or taking notes. She was recording. Microaggressions weren't just individual cuts. They were designed to be deniable, to live in the space between a smirk and a shrug. Whitney Sloan passed by again, smiling broadly at passengers in 1A and 1B, another mimosa. Sir. She laughed gently at something the man said. She hadn't once made eye contact with Naomi since the water incident, and the fruit tray, it hadn't come back. Naomi leaned toward her son. You okay, baby? Jaden nodded, but his shoulders seemed to curl inward. Can I get something else to drink? What would you like? He thought for a moment. Ginger ale, if they have it. Naomi smiled and pressed the call button. Whitney returned after a full minute, expression already tight. Yes, my son would like a ginger ale, Naomi said. Tone even. Whitney's lips pressed together. We're not serving ginger ale this morning. I already explained that. Naomi tilted her head. Did you? Whitney paused, recalibrating. Yes, earlier. I told. Naomi's voice was soft. You said that to him, not to me. Whitney shifted. Well, the cart doesn't have it. Sorry. She turned without waiting for a response and disappeared toward the galley. Jaden looked down. Maybe I should have asked nicer. Naomi immediately turned toward him. Hey, no, you asked perfectly. This isn't about how you asked. He nodded, but didn't meet her eyes. A moment later, Whitney returned, holding a can of ginger ale. She placed it on the tray table with more force than necessary. It made a sharp clunk. There, found one, she said. She turned again, walking off before Naomi could say a word. Jaden reached for the can with both hands, trying not to make a mess. The moment he popped it open, the carbonation hissed louder than expected. The can slipped slightly, splashing ginger ale across the tray table and onto his shirt. Naomi reacted instinctively, grabbing a napkin. It's okay, but before she could finish the sentence, Whitney was already storming back. Oh my God, she snapped. Really, Jaden froze. Whitney reached over the seat and swatted the can from the tray table, knocking it sideways and splashing what was left of the ginger ale onto the floor. Her hand struck Jaden's fingers in the process. Not a full slap, but not an accident. Jaden jerked back, his cup hit the ground, and the cabin went still. Naomi rose from her seat slowly. There was a long, breathless moment where no one moved. Whitney looked up, suddenly aware of what she'd done, but her expression didn't carry regret, only defensiveness. He spilled it. I told him not to. Naomi's voice cut through the air like a blade. Do not speak to my son. Whitney froze. Naomi knelt beside Jaden, who was holding his hand, eyes wide. Did she hurt you? She asked gently. Jaden nodded just slightly. She slapped it away. Naomi stood again. Passengers who had previously ignored the tension were now fully alert. A man across the aisle lowered his newspaper slowly. A young woman behind Naomi started recording with her phone subtly, but intentionally. Naomi turned fully toward Whitney. You touched my child. Whitney's arms crossed. It wasn't a slap. He was spilling things. It was a reaction. Naomi's tone didn't change. You laid your hand on my son, without cause, without apology. He's not hurt, Whitney snapped, voice raised now. It was barely Naomi raised her hand. I need you to stop talking. Whitney opened her mouth again, but no words came out. I want you to go to the galley and stay there, Naomi said. You will not come near us again for the remainder of the flight. Whitney laughed, short and sharp. You don't get to give orders on this plane. Naomi didn't blink. I wasn't giving you an order. I was offering you an exit. A new voice interrupted. His name tag read Marshall Keene. He had thinning hair and a forced smile. I'm the lead flight attendant, he said. Let's all take a breath here. Naomi turned to him with that same stillness. It wasn't anger. It was presence. No need for breath. I'm filing a formal report the moment we land. In fact, I'll be on the phone with legal before this plane hits the tarmac. Marshall shifted uncomfortably. We understand emotions are high, but emotions. Naomi repeated, soft but firm. Sir, I'm not emotional. I'm observant, and I'm documenting every second of this. Whitney was now halfway behind Marshall, arms crossed tightly. I didn't hit him, she muttered. Naomi spoke again. You don't need to confess to me. The footage will speak louder. Marshall looked around the cabin, realizing for the first time that passengers were no longer pretending not to watch. Eyes were everywhere. Phones, too. A man from row 3 stood up the one with. He spoke calmly, but loudly enough for all to hear. I saw the interaction clearly. The child was not being aggressive. The response was completely disproportionate. He turned toward Naomi. Would you like me to witness for your report? Naomi nodded once. Thank you, Marshall stammered. We will escalate this to the company when we land. Naomi turned toward him. Don't worry, you won't need to. I'll do it for you. She sat back down slowly, pulling Jaden close. He was shaking slightly, not crying, just stunned. Naomi wrapped her arm around his shoulder, letting him lean into her, behind her. The murmurs began, conversations that were no longer whispers. Did she just hit that kid? Is she the Theravive woman? Oh, God, this is gonna blow up. Naomi reached for her phone. Her hands were still. Her heart wasn't. She opened her secured signal app. Raylan, execute protocol Indigo. Seconds later, the response appeared. Understood. Press is already tracking incident. Stay composed. You're not alone. Naomi looked down at her son. I'm okay, he whispered, but she could see in his eyes he wasn't. She kissed his temple. I know, but I am, and that's enough for now. She turned to the window, the clouds passing steadily by. Outside, the sky was calm. Inside, something unstoppable had just been set in motion. Naomi sat still for a long moment after the chaos faded, her arm wrapped tightly around Jaden's shoulders. The warmth of his small body grounded her, kept her from spiraling into the rage coiled quietly behind her ribs. Her breathing remained measured, deliberate, but she could feel the heat behind her eyes pressing for release. No tears, she thought. Not now. The sky outside had begun to fade into gray. Shadows from the clouds above slipped over the cabin like a veil. People whispered. Seats creaked. From her pocket, she pulled out her phone again, shielding the screen slightly as she typed in a secure passcode. The signal on Elevar Flight 609 was low, but she had anticipated that. Months ago, she'd commissioned the installation of a high-security offline communication relay that pinged her core team via encrypted burst messages. She rarely used it, only for emergencies. This was one. She tapped into the app Protocol Indigo Level 2 Incident Escalation Live Environment under Nature of Incident. She typed physical aggression toward minor by airline crew, Elevar Air, Flight 609, documented by passengers, witnesses confirm. Then she hesitated. Under personal status, she considered her options. Composed, strategic, focused. She selected all three. She hit send, back in her seat. Jaden had curled his knees up slightly, trying to disappear into the cushion. "You're not invisible," she whispered. "You're seen. You're safe." He nodded, though his eyes were distant. Her heart ached, not just for what had happened, but for what it was already doing to him. Shame doesn't wait for permission. It sneaks in through silence, through doubt. She would not let it take root. Footsteps returned, slow, hesitant. Naomi glanced up. This time it wasn't Whitney or Marshall. It was a young woman with deep brown skin and a Navy college hoodie. Her hair was in a long braid, and her phone was still in her hand. She looked barely 20. "Hi," she said softly. "My name's Lucia. I'm a journalism student at Emerson." Naomi studied her face, honest, nervous, but steady. "I recorded the whole thing," Lucia said. "Would you like a copy?" Naomi took a breath. "Yes, please." Lucia handed over her phone with the video open and paused at the exact moment Whitney struck Jaden's hand. Naomi watched it, not once. It was clear, audible, deliberate. Lucia looked down. "I didn't mean to be nosy. I've seen stuff like this before, but never this clear. Never to a kid." "You weren't nosy," Naomi said. "You were brave." Lucia flushed. "I can airdrop it or email you a copy. I also sent it to my media professor." Naomi's head tilted slightly. "Did you post it anywhere?" Lucia hesitated. "I uploaded it to my story. Didn't tag you or anything, but it's already getting views. People are asking questions." Naomi considered this. The fire was already lit. "Thank you," she said. "Keep your original copy safe." Lucia nodded and returned to her seat. Naomi watched her go with a kind of quiet gratitude she rarely afforded strangers. Then she pulled up Raylan's thread again. The message was already blinking. "Protocol Indigo Level 2 confirmed. Press advisory on hold. Legal retained. Social monitoring live. Your son okay?" Naomi typed back, shaken, "But prepare Level 3. If footage trends, expect board escalation within 6 hours." The reply came instantly. "Understood. Standing by. We've got you." She placed her phone gently on her tray table and looked out the window again. This was the part that always felt the most surreal, being at 38,000 feet with so little control and yet holding the fate of an entire company in her hands. From somewhere behind her, a voice muttered, "She's gonna sue them blind." Another responded, "Bet they offer her a quiet payout." A soft laugh followed. "Yeah, like that's ever worked on someone like her." Naomi closed her eyes for a beat. People always made assumptions about her, that she was angry, that she was fragile, that she'd be satisfied with an apology, but they didn't understand her wiring. Her scars had formed in silence, and silence taught her one thing. You don't. Marshall appeared again, looking like a man already rehearsing his deposition. "I've spoken with my team," he began cautiously. "We understand this incident has escalated. On behalf of Elevare Air, I'd like to offer an in-flight written apology and a gesture of compensation for the distress." Naomi didn't even blink. "Is this your legal team's language?" she asked. He froze. It's standard protocol in the event of." She cut him off gently. This wasn't turbulence. This wasn't a missed meal. This was assault on a child. Marshall swallowed. "I understand, ma'am, but I have limited authority mid-flight. Then exercise that authority wisely," she said. "You're not required to fix this, but you are responsible for what you choose to ignore from this moment forward." He nodded slowly. "May I ask, are you pressing charges?" Naomi paused. "Not yet." Marshall blinked. "Not yet. There's still time," she said, "for your crew to show character." With that, she turned back toward Jaden, who had drifted lightly into sleep against her side. She pulled the blanket tighter around him. Marshall stood awkwardly for a moment, then stepped away. Across the aisle, Andre Voss was scribbling in a leather-bound notebook. When Naomi looked up, he met her gaze. "If you need legal representation," he said softly, "I'm in civil rights. I've handled airline misconduct cases before." She smiled faintly. "Noted." He leaned closer. "But I suspect you won't need anyone else to fight your battle." Naomi tilted her head. "I usually don't, but I never refuse an ally with a clear sense of justice." He smiled, then sat back down, resuming his writing. Naomi checked her phone again. 12,482 views, 437 shares. A flight 609 trending in Seattle. Raylan's final message of the hour appeared. "Naomi, a journalist from FlightWatch News just reached out. They have the video, requesting comment." Naomi responded with a single word. "Agreed." Outside the window, the clouds had parted. The light streamed in slowly, warming Jaden's cheek as he slept. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. This wasn't how she'd imagined their first flight together. But maybe this was exactly the kind of moment that shaped a boy like him into a man like her. Not in the pain, but in how it was answered. It began with a ping. Naomi's phone vibrated gently on the tray table beside her. A soft ripple in the silence. She glanced at the screen, then again. Mentions, tags, alerts. The story, posted by Lucia Mendoza, had escaped the vacuum of social media silence and entered the bloodstream of the internet. Flight 609 was no longer a string of random characters. It was a signal, a flare, and it was burning brighter by the second. She pulled down her notification bar. BLACKCEO's son, allegedly struck by flight attendant. Child assaulted on plane. New footage shakes Elevare Airlines. This woman isn't yelling. She's watching, and the world is watching with her. The last one came from a verified journalist's account. A freeze frame of Naomi's calm but unflinching face filled the thumbnail, seated with her arm around Jaden. Whitney's hand caught mid-motion, inches from the child's fingers. It had begun. She leaned back and shut her eyes, not in exhaustion and calculation. Jaden stirred beside her. "Mom, I'm here," she said gently, placing a hand over his chest. "Rest easy. We're almost there." How much longer? Naomi checked her watch. About 50 minutes. Jaden was quiet for a moment. "Are they mad at us?" She turned fully to face him. "No," she said, low and certain. "They're not mad at us. They're afraid of what the truth will cost them." He blinked. "What does that mean?" Naomi paused. "It means sometimes people break the rules hoping no one's watching. But the world is because of your phone." She smiled faintly. "Because of your courage. Mine just helped share it." Across the aisle. Andre Voss sat up straighter, now visibly aware that the atmosphere had shifted. He leaned forward slightly. "It's spreading fast," he said. "I know. You good with that?" Naomi considered it for a moment. "I didn't start it," she said, "but I'll finish it." 2 rows back. Whispers grew louder. "Wait, that's her, the tech exec from Theravive. Yeah, billion-dollar startup, mental health platform. She testified before Congress last year." Someone else added, "She's on our flight." "Oh, they messed with the wrong one?" Naomi ignored them. She opened her secured Signal app again and sent a quiet alert level 3. Activate external media shield. No statements until ground briefing. Prepare crisis room for 7:00 p.m. The reply from Raylan came instantly, confirmed. Elevar PR is issuing a hold at the front of the cabin. Marshall returned once again, now visibly rattled. He crouched beside her row like a man trying to defuse a bomb with tweezers. "Ma'am," he began, "the captain has been notified of the situation. We're doing everything we can to ensure a smooth landing and escort. We want to keep everyone safe." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Safe? Your crew member put her hands on a child." Marshall swallowed. "She's been removed from active service for the remainder of the flight. We've relocated her to the jump seat at the rear galley. She should have been removed from the aircraft. That's not a decision I can make mid-air," he said. "But I want to express again." "Save it," Naomi said, softly but firmly. "The time for statements is over. The time for accountability begins when the wheels hit the ground." Marshall nodded and slowly stood, a few rows back. Lucia Mendoza made eye contact with Naomi. Then, "You okay?" Naomi offered a small, tired smile. "Not yet," she thought, "but I will be." She tapped her phone once more and opened her digital vault. In it were documents she never expected to use, signed NDAs, her ownership share in Elevar's Wellness AI division, screenshots from early compliance reports showing diversity gaps in crew conduct. She hadn't wanted to wield them, but now they were weapons. She wasn't seeking revenge. She was demanding clarity. From beside her, Jaden whispered, "Are we in trouble?" She looked at him. Hard. "No, we're not. But people are talking about us." "They are," Naomi said. "But you know what else they're doing? What they're remembering. They're learning. They're watching something they usually pretend not to see." Jaden frowned, his small brow furrowed, like what Naomi paused, choosing her words with care, like how people treat. Then he asked something that made Naomi's throat tighten. "Would they still be talking if you weren't famous?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, they wouldn't." He didn't ask why. He already knew. Naomi leaned back, the seat cool against her skin. Her fingers curled around the edge of the armrest, and for a brief moment she let herself feel it, the ache of being tired, of constantly having to explain, prove, defend, but only for a moment. Then she sat up straighter. 2 rows ahead, a passenger opened his laptop. Naomi caught a glimpse of the headline as he scrolled Theravive CEO involved in mid-air incident, child allegedly struck by airline staff, allegedly, even with video, even with witnesses. It always starts with allegedly. She closed her eyes again. Lucia leaned forward and whispered, "They'll be waiting for you at the gate. Press, legal, maybe even police." Naomi opened her eyes. "Good," she said. "Let 'em." "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent into Boston Logan. Please return to your seats and fasten seatbelts. Cabin crew, prepare for landing." Whitney did not return to the aisle. Her absence was a quiet, guilty confirmation. Jaden looked out the window. "Can we still go to the museum?" he asked. Naomi blinked. "What? In Boston? You said we could go to that place with the dinosaur bones, if we had time." Naomi felt a sudden warmth rise behind her eyes. "Yes," she said softly. "If you still want to." He nodded. "I think dinosaurs were brave." She smiled, brushing his curls back again. "You're braver." As the plane dipped lower, the city below sparkled beneath the clouds, and inside that aircraft, somewhere between silence and steel, sat a mother who had built an empire and a boy whose dignity she would defend to the very end. The landing gear groaned. The sky outside had shifted from gray to gold, the setting sun casting long slants of light across the cabin. Naomi's reflection flickered in the oval window, calm, unreadable, waiting. Jaden sat beside her, chewing silently on a mint from his backpack, his fingers fidgeting with the torn corner of a napkin. Naomi placed her hand gently over his. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded once, but his voice was quiet. "Are they going to take us off the plane?" She looked at him for a long moment. "No," she said. "We'll walk off together, just like we walked on." He blinked at her, as if unsure whether to believe that strength, but then he squeezed her fingers and said nothing else. The wheels hit the tarmac with a heavy shudder. A few passengers clapped softly, an awkward tradition Naomi never understood. But this time, it felt more like relief than celebration. "Welcome to Boston," the captain said over the intercom, voice stiff. "We ask that all passengers remain seated as we taxi to the gate. Cabin crew, remain in position." Naomi glanced up and noticed something odd. Whitney wasn't at the front of the cabin. The usual final bows, the smiles, the thank you for flying, none of it. Whitney was gone, or at least hidden. Marshal Keene reappeared instead, standing near the bulkhead with a tablet clutched tightly in his hands. His eyes kept flicking toward Naomi's row, as if checking to see whether she was going to explode or stand up. She did neither. She simply waited. The plane rolled to a smooth stop. The seatbelt signs clicked off, but no one stood. The tension was so thick, it weighed on the air. Marshall finally cleared his throat and addressed the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated for just a moment. We have a minor adjustment to our deplaning process today due to procedural matters." A low wave of whispers followed. Marshall stepped forward, approaching her row as if navigating a minefield. "Ms. Ellison," he began, quiet. "I've been informed that a gate escort will be present. There are Members of our leadership team waiting just beyond the jet bridge. Naomi raised an eyebrow. I assume legal counsel is among them. Marshall hesitated. I believe so. Naomi stood, slowly and deliberately. She reached for her coat and bag. Then she turned to help Jaden down from his seat, smoothing the front of his shirt with motherly instinct. Is there law enforcement? She asked. Marshall stiffened. I've been told they are present in an observatory capacity only. Naomi's gaze didn't flicker. They're not here for me. No, ma'am, not at all. She nodded. Then let's not waste time. She walked forward without waiting for clearance, her posture straight, her chin high. Jaden followed closely, his small hand gripping hers tightly. Behind her, no one dared speak. The sound of the cabin faded behind the sealed door, replaced by the electric buzz of airport life mechanical beeps, the low murmur of voices, and somewhere beyond the gate, the unmistakable whir of media equipment. 3 figures stood just ahead. The first wore a tailored gray suit and an anxious expression. He stepped forward, hand extended. Ms. Ellison, I'm Daniel Craig, VP of Passenger Experience for Billionaire. We are deeply sorry for Naomi walked past him without acknowledging the handshake. To his left stood a woman with a Navy Billionaire badge and clipped voice. Ms. Ellison, if you'd be willing to step into the lounge for a private note, Naomi said without stopping. You'll say whatever you have to say where everyone can hear it. She reached the glass wall that separated the terminal gate from the rest of the concourse, and there they were. Photographers, journalists, passengers holding up phones. Lucia Mendoza stood near the front of the crowd, clutching her backpack, her eyes wide. She gave a small wave. Naomi nodded back. A reporter in a blue blazer leaned over the rope line. Ms. Ellison, are you pressing charges against the airline? Naomi didn't answer. A second voice called out. Is it true your son was physically assaulted mid-flight? Naomi turned slightly, letting her face be seen. Her voice was quiet, measured, but it carried. My child was harmed. That's not an allegation. It's a fact. Another reporter asked, Do you plan to take legal action? Naomi held Jaden's hand a little tighter. I'm not here to make threats, she said. I'm here to make sure this never happens to another child again. Behind her, the Billionaire representative stood frozen, unsure whether to approach or for those asking why this matters. She said, Ask yourself this: if a child can be struck, dismissed, and then lied about, while sitting next to his mother, in first class, on a major airline. Imagine what happens when there are no cameras. The terminal went still. No one moved. Naomi knelt beside Jaden and fixed the collar of his hoodie. Tell me something, she whispered. Still want to see the dinosaurs? Jaden gave a tiny smile. Yeah, I do. She stood, and they began to walk. She didn't look back. Not at the airline reps, not at the cameras, not at the silence they left behind. They walked through the terminal like any mother and son would, one step at a time, hearts still pounding but heads held high. Just beyond the gate, a black SUV waited with tinted windows and a driver who opened the door the moment they approached. Inside sat Raylan Cho, eyes already scanning news feeds. Everyone wants a statement. Billionaire's board is in full lockdown. CEO's in Europe. He's already issued an internal emergency brief. Naomi settled into the seat beside her son. We'll go to the museum first, she said softly. Raylan blinked. The museum? Jaden wants to see the dinosaurs. That comes first. Raylan nodded without question. Understood. Outside the SUV window, a line of news vans pulled into the curb. Inside, Naomi looked down at her phone. New messages, new hashtags, new waves of outrage. But she didn't open them. Not yet. She leaned back in the seat, closed her eyes, and exhaled. The gate was closed, but the world had just opened. The SUV glided past rows of red brick buildings as Boston blurred through the window. Jaden had fallen asleep, his head resting gently against Naomi's side. His soft breathing rose and she kept her hand on his back, her other on her lap, fingers still curled slightly as if she were holding something fragile. But she wasn't. Not anymore. Outside, the world was rising. Social media was a storm. Screens were filling with her name, her son's name, headlines, hashtags, outrage. But in the quiet of the vehicle, Naomi heard none of it, only her pulse and an old voice, one from decades ago. Smile, baby, always smile. Don't let them see how tired you are. It was her mother's voice, a whisper from a different life, from another place that smelled like warm cornbread and floor wax, the sound of heels on linoleum, the sting of being told to wait, to watch, to endure. Back then, Naomi had been just a girl with good grades and frizzy hair, sitting on folding chairs in bank lobbies while her mother cleaned bathrooms. Sometimes Naomi would clutch her backpack tight, eyes fixed on the polished shoes of executives who never looked down far enough to see her. She learned two things early. Silence doesn't equal safety, and visibility doesn't guarantee respect. She thought she had outrun that, outbuilt it, outgrown it, but on that flight seat 2C, that old truth came roaring back. No amount of titles or tailored suits could protect her son from what was still buried deep in this world. The instinct to diminish, the reflex to dehumanize, the lie that power shields you from prejudice, it didn't. And the slap, small, sharp, fast wasn't just about Jaden. It was about every moment Naomi had spent folding herself into something more palatable. Every pause she took before speaking up in boardrooms. Every time she was called intimidating for simply refusing to be interrupted. She stared out the window, past the trees and the brick and the history. They've offered a private sit-down with the airline's general counsel and their chief of operations, Boston, tonight. Naomi didn't move. They say it's not an admission of guilt. Raylan continued. Just a conversation. Off record. Naomi smiled faintly. Of course it is. You want me to shut it down? Let them talk, she said. Sometimes, the most useful thing you can do is let people say exactly who they are. Raylan nodded. Understood. They passed a familiar intersection and slowed near the museum. Naomi looked down at her son, still sleeping, still holding on to something in his dream. Let's give him a moment here, she said softly. He's earned it. The driver pulled into the loop, and Naomi lifted Jaden gently, adjusting him in her lap as she kissed the top of his curls. She closed her eyes and let herself drift not to sleep, but to memory. There had been another flight, fresh out of grad school, heading to her first interview at a tech firm in San Francisco. She'd bought the cheapest seat on the red-eye, carried all her belongings in one torn duffel. She remembered the man beside her. He had looked over once, then summoned the flight attendant to ask if she was in the wrong seat. He spoke as if she weren't there. She doesn't seem like she belongs here. Naomi had smiled, politely, pretending not to understand. She was used to that strategy back then, survive first, confront later. But something in her stomach had twisted. Not because he doubted her, but because she had started to believe him. That day, she aced the interview. But she remembered staring at herself in the hotel mirror afterward, whispering, "Next time, you'll take up space. You won't shrink." It became her vow. And now, here she was. The same girl, grown tall, holding her own son on her lap. Raylan spoke again. "They've put Whitney on administrative leave." Naomi opened her eyes. "Publicly, not yet. Internal memo only. They're waiting to see your next move." Naomi didn't answer. "What is your next move?" Raylan asked gently. Naomi looked down at her hands, at the place where Jaden's juice had spilled, drying into a faint, sticky mark on her sleeve. "My move," she said softly, "is not about punishment. It's about prevention." She reached for her phone and opened a blank document titled The Ellison Standard, a framework she had drafted years ago. Policies, training mandates, restorative justice models, crisis response guides. It had been just theory, an ideal for how institutions could rebuild trust. She began updating it, adding the title, The Flight 609 Clause. Her fingers moved swiftly: mandatory independent arbitration, transparent complaint tracking, real-time accountability tools for flight staff, passenger bill, zero tolerance for retaliatory silence. She paused, then added a final line: "No child should be taught that silence is safer than being seen." She closed the document. Jaden stirred. "Are we here?" "We are," she whispered. She opened the door slowly, stepping out into the afternoon light. A few nearby families passed by, holding museum pamphlets and laughing softly. One woman noticed her, then looked again. Her face changed, but not with fear or awe, with recognition, with empathy. "Is he the little boy?" she asked gently, nodding toward Jaden. Naomi nodded. The woman knelt slightly to wave. "You okay?" Sweetie Jaden gave a tiny smile. "Yeah." The woman looked at Naomi. "Thank you for saying something," she said. "For doing something." Naomi gave a soft nod. "We all should," and she meant it. As they entered the museum, the echo of laughter and chatter filled the space. Jaden tugged her hand, pulling her toward the enormous fossil exhibit he whispered, eyes wide. Naomi followed his gaze, and there it was, a full T-Rex skeleton, towering and proud, bones that had survived extinction, buried in silence for centuries, now standing tall under glass and light. Jaden whispered, "Told you dinosaurs were brave." Naomi smiled. "No," she said softly, wrapping her arm around him. "You are." And this time, when she said it, she believed it in every bone. The conference room was too quiet, not silent. Exactly, there was a hum from the overhead lighting, the soft thud of shifting papers, the rustle of someone's nervous jacket, but all of it felt staged, controlled, like a room built not for truth, but containment. Naomi sat at the long, polished walnut table. Across from her sat 3 men and 1 woman. Each had a pad of notes. Each wore that same careful, PR-trained smile. Daniel Craig, the VP of Passenger Experience, cleared his throat. "Ms. Ellison, thank you again for agreeing to meet. We understand this has been a difficult experience." Naomi didn't respond. She simply waited. Daniel fidgeted with his pen. "We want to start by saying we're deeply sorry for what happened on the Flight 609, he continued. "Our team has reviewed the preliminary report, and we take full responsibility for the distress your family has endured." "Distress?" Naomi asked quietly. Daniel hesitated. The incident. Naomi leaned forward slightly. Call it what it was. There was a pause. Physical misconduct by a crew member, said the woman in the navy blazer. Against a minor. Thank you, Naomi said. Now we can begin. She opened her leather folder, slid out a small stack of printed documents, and laid them flat in front of her. This, she said, tapping the first page, is a report from 2 years ago submitted by a former Elevar flight attendant named Mariah King. In it, the report was filed through your internal portal. It was flagged. It was dismissed. Daniel blinked. I'm not familiar with that report. Naomi slid it forward. This, she said, tapping the second page, is a passenger complaint from last year again on an Elevar flight filed by a family who claimed their son was harassed by a flight attendant and later asked to switch seats despite being ticketed in first class. No action taken. Where did you obtain these? Someone began, but Naomi raised a hand. I don't need to explain my sources, she said. What matters is the pattern, and Flight 609 didn't start with my son. It ended with him. That's the difference. The room went still again. Raylan sat quietly beside her, her laptop open, eyes scanning real-time social analytics. The numbers were climbing, fast. Naomi looked at each of the executives in turn. You're not here because you care. Ellison, with respect, said the woman, we do care, deeply. I myself am a mother. This isn't about parenthood, Naomi cut in. It's about power and how your systems protected the wrong people. Again. The man at the far end of the table cleared his throat. If you're considering legal action, of course, we want to cooperate fully. Naomi tilted her head. What makes you think I haven't already begun? He went quiet. She reached into her folder again and pulled out a crisp document marked with her company's logo, Theravive. This, she said, sliding it to the center of the table, is not a lawsuit. Yet, it's a proposal. Daniel leaned forward. A proposal, Naomi nodded. A new partnership between Theravive and Elevar, one that redefines how you train, audit, and measure dignity. Not just customer service, not just diversity dignity. She tapped the title, The Ellison Protocol. The woman read the subtitle, Dignity Under Pressure. A real-time accountability framework for airline operations. Naomi let the silence stretch. Then she added, It's been in development for 3 years, modeled after trauma-informed crisis response, embedded bias detection, passenger feedback integration in real time, and mandatory third-party arbitration for every discrimination report. One of the men scoffed softly. That's ambitious. Naomi's gaze hardened. So was launching an airline. So was flying. Raylan looked up from her laptop. Over 1.3 million views as of this hour, including reshared segments from at least 5 major media outlets. NBC's legal desk is already drafting op-eds. The woman from Elevar swallowed. You came prepared. No, Naomi said softly. I came tired. Tired of being silent. Tired of watching the same stories play out. Tired of children being taught that dignity is a luxury reserved for certain people in certain... Naomi looked at her for a moment, then softened just enough to ask, then help make it right. Daniel cleared his throat again. This protocol, what exactly are you asking from us? Naomi answered without hesitation. Full implementation across all domestic flights within 180 days. Independent oversight, transparent reporting, and, most importantly, a formal, public acknowledgement of what happened to my son. He nodded slowly. You want an apology? No, she replied. I want a record. Words disappear. Policies last. The room grew quiet again. Naomi sat back in her chair. I'm not interested in your press statements. I'm not interested in a payout. I'm interested in a future where someone like Whitney Sloan never makes it past onboarding. She turned to Raylan. Send them the digital brief. Raylan clicked. A tone sounded on their laptops. Naomi rose slowly from her seat. And with that, she collected her folder, nodded once, and walked toward the door. Raylan followed. As they stepped into the hallway, the hum of the fluorescent lights faded, replaced by the buzz of phones, elevators, and muted conversations. Raylan asked, Think they'll do it? Naomi exhaled. They'll resist, they'll delay, but the story's no longer theirs to control. They exited into the evening light. Boston's skyline shimmered against the orange sky. The air was sharp, electric with change. Naomi paused at the top of the stairs. I'm not trying to bring down a company, she said. I know. Raylan replied. I'm trying to rebuild the sky by the next morning. The whispers had become thunder. Naomi woke early, long before the sun, long before Jaden stirred. She sat at the edge of the hotel bed in a white robe, legs crossed, coffee cooling on the windowsill. Instead, she watched the lights of Boston slowly dissolve into dawn, the world below waking up to a new rhythm, one she had helped set in motion. Raylan entered the suite quietly, already dressed in gray slacks and a blazer, tablet in one hand and an unreadable expression on her face. Twitter's imploding, she said. CNN just ran a 5-minute segment on it. They're calling it the slap heard in first class. Naomi gave a tired smile. Of course they are. She finally reached for her phone, unlocked it, and scrolled through her alerts. Hundreds of tags, thousands of comments, some filled with outrage, some with disbelief, some with stories of their own. She paused on one post, an anonymous account with a photo of a young black boy sitting alone at an airport gate. Captioned, My son was asked to move to the back of the plane for balance. He still remembered. Another post showed a flight attendant smiling while hugging a passenger, with the comment, My mom was fired for confronting her co-worker's racist behavior. That was 5 years ago. I've never flown again. Raylan read over her shoulder. They're not just watching Naomi. They're remembering. Naomi nodded slowly. That's the part they never calculate. Memory. There was a soft knock at the suite door. Raylan opened it, revealing Andre Voss, the civil rights attorney from the flight, holding a rolled-up newspaper and a solemn look. He stepped in and laid the paper on the table. The front-page headline read, Dignity Delayed, Airline Faces, Reckoning After Viral Assault on CEO's Son. Below the fold, a photo of Naomi and Jaden walking through the airport. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't waving, just walking, composed and quiet, her hand wrapped around her son's like armor. Andre pointed at the photo. That image, that's not just viral, You've become a symbol, he said, whether you want to or not. Naomi sighed and sat on the couch. I didn't come looking for that, she said. I just wanted to protect my son. Andre sat across from her. Symbols never come looking for power. They're made by people who survive the moment. She looked out the window again, her fingers resting gently on her lap. Raylan scrolled through her tablet. Internal memos from Elevar were leaked this morning. Looks like they're preparing to suspend 2 more staff members from the flight. One from ground crew, one from the response team. Naomi didn't flinch. Too late for patches. The roof already caved in. Industry is panicking. Andre added, "Every airline's DEI department is scrambling. They all think this is the new united moment." Naomi nodded. Except, this time, it's not about overbooking. It's about humanity. A young woman, maybe 24, speaking into a camera from her apartment, tears on her cheeks. "My name is Sasha," she said. "I was 12 when I flew alone for the first time. They moved me out of the exit row even though I had the right ticket, said I looked too immature. But I saw who they gave the seat to, an older white kid. No one listened when I told them. No one cared." Sasha looked straight into the lens. "I saw what Naomi Ellison did. I saw how she sat there quiet, strong, holding her son, and I remembered everything I buried. I'm done being silent. Thank you, Ms. Ellison. Thank you for not backing down." Naomi blinked quickly, then looked away from the screen. Raylan said nothing. She simply placed her hand gently on Naomi's shoulder and let the silence hold. After a long moment, Naomi stood. "I need air." She walked out to the hotel balcony. The wind tugged gently at her robe. She leaned on the railing, her mind drifting, not to the headlines, not even to Elivar, but to Jaden, sleeping peacefully in the other room, unaware of how loud the world had become because of him, or maybe because of her. Her eyes closed. She let herself ask the questions she had been avoiding. Was she doing this for justice, or was she doing it for revenge? Had the fight become about her pride, or was it about restoring something her child had lost? Did it matter? Yes, it had to. She exhaled slowly, then whispered to herself, "I don't want a legacy built on pain." Raylan stepped out beside her, holding a new message. "It's from the White House." Naomi turned sharply. "What they're requesting a private briefing. Not formal, not public, just information. They're watching this very closely." Naomi stared at her. "This isn't just a viral moment anymore," Raylan said. "It's becoming policy, precedent. Department of Transportation just announced they're reviewing passenger dignity protections. The first step, defining what that even means?" Naomi shook her head. "They don't even have a definition for dignity." "Nope," Andre said, "until now." She turned back toward the city. The sky was growing brighter, the storm of attention swirling higher, faster, louder. She hadn't asked for this, but maybe, just maybe, she was the one meant to carry it. She went back inside. Jaden had woken up, rubbing his eyes. "Mom," he mumbled. "Why are people talking about us so much?" Naomi knelt in front of him. "Because sometimes," she said gently, "it takes one small moment to remind the world of a big truth." He blinked. "Are we going home?" Naomi smiled softly. "No," she said, "not yet. We've still got work to do." The chamber doors were heavier than Naomi expected. Not as she stepped through them into the echoing hall of the United States Committee on Transportation Oversight. A subtle shift occurred in her breath, measured, controlled, but undeniably real. It wasn't stage fright. It was the weight of story becoming testimony. Rows of suited lawmakers lined the semicircle of raised desks. Photographers and press hovered at the margins. Above, the seal of the U.S. government loomed large on wood-paneled walls, its eagle carved with a strange kind of irony. This wasn't a court. It wasn't a boardroom. It wasn't even a public town hall. This was the belly of the system, and Naomi Ellison had been invited into it. She adjusted the lapel of her navy blazer. No jewelry, no makeup today, beyond a little concealer under tired eyes. The cameras would see her, but they would not define her. Raylan sat just behind her, silently. Jaden, for the first time in days, stayed at the hotel with a trusted friend and former TheraVive staffer. Naomi didn't want him to hear what she was about to say. Not yet. The clerk called her name. She rose, approached the microphone, and sat at the lone desk facing the semicircle of power. One of the senators, a woman from Oregon, spoke first. "Ms. Ellison, thank you for being here. We understand the personal cost of coming forward in moments like this. We're here today to listen, to learn, and to seek pathways forward." Naomi nodded. "Thank you, Senator." Another voice from the far left, a middle-aged man in a red tie, leaned forward. "Before you begin, Ms. Ellison, I'd just like to clarify you're not a government employee. You're here as a private citizen, correct?" Naomi's eyes didn't blink. "I'm here as a mother." That silenced the room. She inhaled. "I'm the founder and CEO of TheraVive Technologies, a company that works in behavioral health and crisis response architecture. I hold a doctorate in trauma-informed systems, and I've spent the past 14 years building frameworks for institutional accountability." She paused. "But today, I'm not here as a CEO. I'm here because 12 days ago, my 9-year-old son was physically struck by a flight attendant while seated next to me in first class, not during a security emergency, not while posing a threat, but after asking for juice twice." A few gasps echoed in the back of the chamber. Naomi continued. "I've been told by several officials, including some in this room, that what happened to us was unfortunate, isolated, and non-representative. But let me offer a different lens." She lifted a small photograph from her file and placed it on the desk. It was a printout of the moment Jaden turned toward her, his cheek red from the slap. Accumulated silence, accumulated fear, accumulated assumptions that people like my son are somehow more threatening when they are simply present. Her voice didn't rise, but it didn't waver either. There are currently no federal mandates requiring third-party oversight of airline discrimination complaints, no unified passenger dignity policy across carriers, no clear guidelines on what accountability looks like for flight crews who overstep their authority. She looked at each senator in turn. But there are plenty of apology statements. There are settlement checks. There are NDAs. There are reputations to protect. She took a breath. And there are children who now associate flying with fear. The Oregon senator leaned forward. "Ms. Ellison, your submitted protocol, the Ellison Protocol, has proposed sweeping reform. Real-time complaint resolution, anonymous crew assessments, racial equity audits. I've had preliminary talks with 3 other airlines, 1 regional, 1 international, 1 private charter group, and the response private support." Public silence. Laughter rippled from the press seats. Another senator, older, with silver hair and cautious eyes, interjected. "Some may say, respectfully, that policies like these create more liability for airlines, that crew members may be unfairly penalized for simply enforcing rules." Naomi didn't hesitate. Enforcing rules doesn't require diminishing humanity, and policies don't create liability, actions do. A beat passed, then she added, quietly, I've reviewed over 24 passenger incident reports from the past 5 years. Only 2 resulted in any internal consequence. Neither was related to physical harm. She looked at the red-tied senator again. Data doesn't lie, but silence distorts truth. I'm not seeking outrage. I'm asking for order. Dignity should not be a matter of class, or ticket price, or skin tone. It should be the default, from gate to sky. The room was still. Senator Fields, the chair, leaned into his microphone. Thank you, Ms. Ellison. You've honored us with your clarity and your strength. Naomi gave a single nod. The cameras clicked. The press surged forward. Voices rose and fell like birds startled into flight. But Naomi didn't stay. She walked quietly through the side door with Raylan and Andre. Her heart was full, but her shoulders were heavy. Out in the hallway, a janitor stopped her a man in a blue Elevair maintenance shirt who wasn't supposed to be working here, clearly borrowed from logistics. He looked at her with glassy eyes. My daughter. She's 9, too, he said quietly. What you said in there, that mattered. Naomi placed a hand gently over his. He nodded, stepped back, and faded into the corridor. Raylan turned to her. Now what? Naomi looked up at the marble ceiling, where light streamed through high windows. Now, she said, we finish what we started. The press conference was set for noon, but by 10:15 a.m., the crowd had already spilled beyond the security gates. Naomi stood behind the tinted glass of the Elevar headquarters east wing, watching people gather, protesters, reporters, travelers. Some held signs, some just held phones. A group of children from a local school had come, all in matching light blue uniforms. One girl was holding a cardboard sign that said, I deserve to be safe at 30,000 feet. Raylan adjusted the microphone clipped to Naomi's lapel. She did it carefully, quietly, like brushing dust from a sacred painting. She just watched the young girl wave her sign proudly, grinning with the innocent defiance that reminded her of someone she used to be. Do they believe in it? Naomi finally asked. Or are they just scared of losing market share? Raylan hesitated. Does it matter? Naomi smiled faintly. Only if we forget why we're doing it. Inside the conference room, the Elevar CEO, Benjamin Harker, was rehearsing lines with his PR team. He'd flown in from Zurich the night before, an aging executive in a crisp gray suit who had once told shareholders that perception is as important as policy. Naomi had watched that clip more than once, but today he wouldn't be leading the announcement. Naomi would. That had been her condition. At exactly noon. The floor manager cued the lights. The podium mic buzzed on. The cameras rolled. Naomi stepped forward, the Ellison protocol binder held in one hand. Jaden, in a small... She began without introduction. 2 weeks ago, my son and I boarded a flight home. First-class seats, calm weather, nothing unusual. She looked directly into the crowd. Except what happened next was anything but usual. There were no gasps now. Everyone knew the story. What they didn't know was what Naomi would do with it. I'm not here to recount every detail, she said. I'm here to share what comes next. She held up the binder. This is the Ellison Protocol. It's not a theory. It's a blueprint, a commitment, a contract between people who take to the skies and those who carry them. She outlined its pillars: real-time accountability, anonymous incident reporting, independent bias training not outsourced to check-the-box firms, but facilitated by trauma-informed, culturally competent educators, passenger dignity audits, starting next quarter. Naomi continued. Elevar Airlines will implement this protocol across all domestic and international. They will not ask you to be quiet about your experiences. They will ask how they can make it better. There was scattered applause, then it grew, louder, full-bodied, some of it from the children. Naomi closed with one line, looking directly into the nearest lens. This protocol was born in pain, but it lives in possibility. She stepped back. Benjamin Harker approached the mic, face rigid but polite. He offered a few generic lines of support, declared the company's full alignment with Naomi's vision, and said what executives always say in moments like this. "We are learning." Naomi knew he would forget most of what he said before the end of the day, but the world wouldn't. Back in the green room, Jaden ran to her, arms outstretched. "You did it," he whispered into her waist. She knelt and wrapped her arms around him. "We did it." He pulled back and looked up at her with those soft, searching eyes. "Are you mad that it happened?" Naomi paused, smoothing his collar. "Yes, but if it didn't happen," he said slowly, "would you have changed everything?" She blinked. The question landed somewhere deeper than expected. "I don't know," she said softly. "Maybe not this way, maybe not this fast." He looked away. "I still remember her face. The lady who hit me." Naomi placed a hand on his chest. "You don't have to forget it. I kind of want to." She smiled, brushing his cheek. "Then we'll carry it together until it's lighter." A knock at the door interrupted them. Lucia Mendoza, the student journalist who had first posted the viral video, peeked in with her camera bag. "Can I have a few minutes?" she asked. "Not for a network, for my final project." Naomi nodded and welcomed her in. Lucia set up a small camera, no lights, no crew, just a single lens and two voices. "What do you hope people remember about this?" Lucia asked. Naomi didn't hesitate. That change doesn't come when you raise your voice. It comes when your voice refuses to disappear. Lucia smiled and nodded. Later that evening, in the quiet of their hotel room, Naomi tucked Jaden into bed. He clutched his favorite stuffed bear, its ear slightly torn, its fur well worn with memory. "Will you still fly?" he asked sleepily. Naomi sat at the edge of his bed, fingers tracing the hem of the quilt. "I will," she said, "because the sky doesn't belong to fear. It belongs to us." He closed his eyes. "And one day," she added, voice barely above a whisper, "I hope you'll fly knowing that." She stayed there long after he drifted off, the moonlight spilling across the room like soft ribbon. She opened her laptop and began typing an op-ed titled "The Day the Cabin Changed." It wasn't just a recounting. It was a message. A reminder that even pain can become policy. That even injustice can give birth to integrity if we're brave enough to face it. She ended with one final line: "Dignity is not a premium class, it's a human one." And she clicked. It was raining in Seattle the day Naomi and Jaden flew home. Not the dramatic kind of rain, the soft kind that just settles into your jacket, your hair, the space between thoughts. Naomi watched it through the terminal window, the droplets slipping down like silent punctuation. Across from her, Jaden sat with a small backpack on his lap, tracing shapes on the fogged glass. His hair was a little longer now, his posture a little taller. Something about him had shifted in the weeks since Flight 609. She wondered if he noticed it too. A flight attendant walked by and smiled warmly at them. Not the kind of smile that says, "I've been told who you are," but the kind that says, "I see you, and I mean it." That meant more than Naomi could say. As they boarded the aircraft this time, seated in the exact same row, 2A and 2B, she scanned the cabin with practiced ease. The lighting was softer, the crew calmer. She could almost feel, was it a coincidence, or had the culture begun to change? Jaden glanced at her once they sat down. "This is the same kind of plane, right? Same make," she said. "Same layout." He thought for a moment, "But it doesn't feel the same." "No," she said quietly, "it doesn't." He opened the seatback tray and took out a small notebook, something Raylan had given him as a gift. Inside, he'd started sketching again. Animals, stars, clouds with windows and wings. Naomi looked out at the runway. She thought of all the parents who had written her, the ones who had stayed quiet for years, the ones who finally found the courage to speak, the ones who hadn't made it to the microphone, but had changed everything anyway. She thought of Whitney Sloan, not with rage, but with resolve. Last Naomi had heard, she had submitted a resignation letter days after her suspension. No media interviews, no last stand, or maybe, for the first time, she realized her actions had consequences that outlived a news cycle. Naomi would never know for sure. But what mattered more was that Jaden had never asked to see her again. He had chosen his healing. That, too, was its own kind of justice. As the plane began to taxi, Naomi checked her email. Another airline had contacted her, a smaller one, Midwest-based. They wanted to implement the Ellison protocol in full. No edits, no branding changes, just the framework. As is. She replied with one sentence, "Let's build something better." Raylan sent her a message too, attaching a video compilation from Lucia Mendoza's social campaign. It featured children and families holding handwritten signs. "I matter. I belong in any seat. My voice isn't turbulence. My name is not a threat." Jaden leaned over and pointed. "That one's from Atlanta," he said. "I saw her story. I like how they write what they wish someone said to them." She nodded, heart full. The plane lifted into the sky. There was a moment, just a moment, when the clouds parted and the golden sun cut through the windows like something holy. Jaden whispered, "Mom, look, outside." A sea of light stretched across the atmosphere, endless and open. "It looks free," he said. She looked at him. "It is." He paused. "Do you think it always was?" Naomi considered that. "Maybe not for everyone," she said, "but that's what we're trying to fix." The flight was smooth, no seat switching, no strange stares, no tension, and when they landed, a ground attendant greeted them by name. Not because of their fame, but because of something better, recognition with warmth, not spectacle. The airport was quieter this time. No cameras, no reporters, just regular travelers moving through the world. Unaware they were walking outside, the sky was still overcast, but the rain had stopped. A car pulled up to meet them, and as they drove through familiar streets, Naomi noticed a small mural painted on the side of an elementary school. It showed children of every color flying paper airplanes, each with a word written across the wings. Respect, hope, courage, dignity. Jaden tapped the window. "That's new." Naomi smiled. A lot of things are. When they got home, she made tea. He played soft music. For the first time in what felt like months, the house felt like a sanctuary again, not a war room, not a fortress, just a home. She sat down with her journal. There were speeches still to give, letters to answer, laws being drafted with language she had shaped, but none of that mattered as much as this moment, this quiet, this boy, this healed breath. She wrote a single line at the top of a new page. "Let the skies be honest again." And beneath, the next day, an op-ed ran in the Sunday edition of the New York Times. It wasn't from Naomi. It was from a passenger who had once been silent, a father of two who now flew differently. It ended with this: "I don't remember what meal was served. I don't remember the in-flight movie, but I remember how I felt when I saw a child cry in first class and no one moved except his mother. That woman taught us how to land in truth, and I'll never forget it. Neither would the world." So, what does justice really look like? It doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it comes quiet, composed, unapologetically calm, holding a child's hand and refusing to flinch in the face of humiliation. Naomi Ellison didn't raise her voice on Flight 609. She didn't demand revenge. She demanded truth. And in doing so, she gave a voice to every parent, every child, every soul who's ever felt unseen in a space they had every right to be. It was about what the world does after it sees one. It was about systems, silence, and what happens when dignity becomes non-negotiable. Jaden's healing reminded us that justice isn't just courtroom verdicts, it's the quiet restoration of safety for those we love. And Naomi's protocol. It wasn't just policy, it was a promise. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect, feel, or even cry, then you already know what needs to change. We need skies where everyone belongs. No exceptions, no conditions. Let's keep this conversation alive. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story, because what we tell and what we listen to shapes the world we live in. Thank you for watching.